In today's video, I will be building houses using only S-tier materials. Please send help. Greetings friends, Khaios here. In my previous video, I built two houses using F-tier blocks from my block ranking video. One used the objective F-tier blocks, while the other used subjective. Today, I'm going to be attempting to do the same with my objective and subjective S-tier blocks. Same as last time, I have set up two small areas to build within so that I don't end up using the non-S-tier blocks found in the landscape. When it comes to the walls and furniture, I'll be free to use whatever I want. If you thought the last video was a challenge, just wait until you see how much this one is going to test my creativity. But before I dive into the builds, now that I'm back to making content, I have two major goals for 2025. One of them is to build a custom world from scratch, which I'll get into in a different video, and the other is to hit 400,000 subscribers. If you're enjoying my videos and you want to help tell YouTube that you're enjoying them, please consider hitting the subscribe button. Leave a like and a comment to help the AI overlords promote my videos to new viewers. I greatly appreciate everybody who has, and if you're new here, welcome to this awesome community. It's great to have you. Now, let's dive into the challenge. These two chests contain all of the blocks I'll be allowed to use in today's video, in all their splendor. First up, the objective S tier. And here it is. Yep, one block. The strict set of criteria that I set for my objective tier list ended up placing only Meteorite in the S tier. So yeah, this is the only block that I'm allowed to use for the first house. I can't believe that I'm saying this, but how in the world was it easier to build with only F tier blocks than it's going to be to build with S tier blocks? What is even happening here? Alright, so here's the house. Be back soon with a new video. Happy building. Okay, obviously I'm going to build something a bit more substantial than that. And believe it or not, I actually do have a plan. Let's start off with building some landscape. Yes, I did say landscape. Don't worry, it'll all make sense soon. Normally during these time lapses, I describe what materials that I'm using for various parts of the build. So, Meteorite. That was easy. I almost wish that I hadn't made the no landscape rule from the previous video, because then I could have just built a meteor crashing into the earth, and I think it looked pretty cool. But I did, so oh well. Instead of describing what materials I'm going to be using, I'm going to talk about what I'm planning. I want to have a bit of a landscape here. In the last video, I didn't do any landscaping in the first build. The second build was landscape heavy, but that entire area was the house. This time, I'm going to be building a meteorite landscape that won't be part of the house, then build a valid house on top of it. The reason behind that is that there is only one block that I could work with, and I really need to work hard to make this look more interesting. A landscape will really lend itself to elevating the build. Now let's start the house, which will be on the right side of the box. Meteorite is a fiery, dangerous block of death, so naturally, I want to make a perfectly wholesome house scene. There will be a bridge over the pit, so I will start by laying that out along with the foundation. As for the house design, I'm thinking that a simple gable roof house will work just fine. I'm also going to start a tree on the left side. I'm still thinking about how I want to do the leaves, so while I think on that, I'm going to also build a cloud above the house. I figure why not make the most out of this build area. As for the tree, I'm going to actuate the bark segments that I've already placed, not only so that you can pass in front of the tree, but also because I want to be able to tell the difference between the branch and the leaves, so that I can get the shape feeling just right. So with it actuated, let me quickly lay out the leaves. And while I do that, my supporters over on Patreon, as well as right here with my YouTube members, are some of the biggest reasons I'm able to focus so much on making consistent content right now. Their generosity helps keep a roof over my head and keeps the content flowing. If you're able to and you would like to help support the channel further, please consider heading over to Patreon and supporting me there, or doing it right here as a YouTube member. I offer several rewards, from my video schedule to world downloads and even a private Discord server where you can chat with me directly. I want to give a huge thank you to all of my amazing supporters, and thank you very much for your time. Now, back to the video. All of the blocks are now placed, but the build doesn't exactly look good yet. Obviously, I'm planning on improving this, but how? I have two ideas in mind. The first idea is to make this build entirely a silhouette scene. So what I would do is take shadow paint and slap it over all of the build. Honestly, I think it looks pretty good. I've not really built many silhouette houses or scenes in the past, however this feels far too simple of a solution for my one material issue. Kinda feels like I'm cheating. That leads me to my second idea. As it turns out, Meteorite works pretty well with paints of most type. Not every block in Terraria works well with paint. Even deep paints can struggle to paint some of the blocks, but not this one. All of these blocks are Meteorite, in fact. The paint almost feels like it's changing the texture of the block somehow, but I assure you, these are all the same block. So instead of taking the easy silhouette route, what I'm going to do is try and make the house look good by using a bunch of normal paint. Let's get to it. First off, the house will have a black shingle roof and white sidewalls. Gray paint makes Meteorite look decent as a stone block, so I'll be using that for the foundation and the bridge. I'll also carry the gray throughout various portions of the underground. At first, I use normal lime paint to create a grass substitute, but it's pretty pale, so I'll end up changing it to deep lime in a moment. Brown paint simulates dirt underneath the lime grass, as well as the tree's trunk. Deep green works perfectly for the tree's leaves. I wanted to try negative paint for the cloud, as it does lighten the block, but honestly I don't like it as much as white paint, so I just went with that instead. It was certainly worth a shot. At this point in the build, I'm pretty unhappy with how much Meteorite is glowing, as it's distracting with the underground being so orange. The glow is useful in many cases, but not in this one, so I'm going to shadow paint most of the underground blocks. As a transition between the gray paint and the shadow paint, I do a line of black. This might come as a shock to you, but Meteorite blends with Meteorite. Riveting, insightful commentary, I know. But my point with that statement is that since everything underground is blended together, there are some very straight square lines where the shadow paint meets the black paint and where black meets gray. I am absolutely not a fan of that, so I'm going to take my hammer and shape the points where those blocks connect to intentionally create some gaps. And already the underground texture is looking much better, but it's about to pop off even more. It is time to move on to the walls. I'm going to start with the gaps underground to tie it together a bit better. Fractured stone wall will be used with shadow and black paint to fill in those gaps. Cracked dirt wall will fill in the gaps underneath the grass. Living leaf wall will finish up the tree, both in the trunk when painted brown, as well as in the branches when it's unpainted. The living leaf will also serve as a couple of small bushes. Cloud wall will be used in the cloud, while worn and craggy stone wall line the edges of the pit. I had to experiment around with the bridge a little bit until I was happy, but in the end I went with ebonstone brick wall, shadewood fence, boreal fence, and ashwood wall. The ashwood was made a little bit more thin by lining the edges of it with echo wall. Lastly, moving on to the house, the foundation is made out of ashwood, shadewood fence, and green slab. I blended the sidewalls with the rooftop using hardened sand wall. The house itself has rich mahogany and shadewood fence by the door, boreal wood, palm wood, glass, and large bamboo in the main room, a line of ashwood separating the room from the attic, and green slab and planked wall in the attic. And that wraps up all the walls in this build. Decoration time. It's a small house, so the interior decoration will be pretty quick and simple. A sofa, some storage in the attic, a potted tree, a workbench with a mug, an ebonwood door, and 2 Medusa banners for the interior. Some strange plants, a flower, and some robopiles on the exterior. Lastly, I'm going to illuminate coat the cloud to make it a little bit brighter and have it pop out a bit more. And with that, the objective S tier build is done. It looks pretty good, at least in my opinion, as long as you don't think too much about these sparks flying around everywhere. I'm pretty happy with the outcome. Now it's time for my subjective S tier list. Has a few more blocks in it, so I've got a bit more material to work with, though that's an incredibly low bar to set, isn't it? It's still going to be quite limiting and a fun challenge, so let's see what we have to work with here. Poo block, conveyors, cracked bricks, leaf blocks, thin ice, grate, and hailstone brick. Still pretty restrictive, but worry not, I have an idea of what I want to do with this. First things first, this build will also have a landscape, though while the last one had a bit of a spark, this one is a bit of a stinker. Yeah, I'm going to be doing the entire landscape out of poo block. Honestly, as gross as it sounds, it looks fairly decent as a mud substitute when you paint it brown. Now, you may have noticed during the time-lapse of the landscape that there were no stink clouds around my character or flies hanging around the blocks. I'm using 2 instances of Terraria to record. One is the camera account that I use in the background for time-lapse shots, while I build in the other instance of Terraria. While the background version can see most things, like my character moving and placing stuff, Terraria doesn't generate particles or anything like that while the program is tabbed out. So the flies are there, you just don't see them during the time-lapse. Next up, I'm going to add a foundation for the house, which will be made out of hailstone brick. For this build, here's what I'm thinking. I've got a little bit of a mix of everything. Some metallic stuff, some nature stuff, and some stone stuff. In order to use everything, I thought it might be fun to try and build a dilapidated castle ruin that is overgrown with some plants. Outside of the ruins is a futuristic vehicle. The idea here is that some explorers are checking out some ruins of the past. Starting with the house, I'll be placing down some honey block. No, honey isn't in the S tier, but it's just a temporary filler. The ruins are mostly going to be built out of cracked bricks, but I want to have several pockets of leaves breaking through the build. You can't block swap to replace cracked bricks, and if you mine the cracked bricks, they have a tendency to crumble the other blocks around them. So to make my life a little bit easier, I'll be shaping the ruins with honey, then I will place the leaves where I want them to be before block swapping the rest of the honey out for cracked bricks. I'm building 2 fragile houses in a couple weeks time. Pretty nuts. Next, I'm going to place a large amount of grate in the middle of the ruins, then actuate them, paint them brown in a few spots, and hammer them to look broken. This is going to be a large window, as I love this block for medieval style castle windows. Now, let's take a look at the exterior vehicle. Conveyor belts are going to make caterpillar tracks. Over that will be a layer of hailstone brick, followed by a layer of grate. I don't have a ton of materials to work with here, and these all feel fairly techy when used together. Coming up, the walls will really help tie this vehicle together, but for now, the last blocks to use on it are the thin ice, which get used as the windows. Before I move on to the walls, I don't want a ton of flies everywhere in this build like there are at the moment. I don't mind having a few of them here or there, but not like this. So I'm going to take some grate and echo coating and place some over the poo block over most of the ground. We won't be able to see the grate since it's echo coated, but since it's a solid tile, it will prevent flies from spawning. I can't actuate it, however, or the flies will return, so it may look a little odd if you were to walk around the build. Now, let's get to the walls. I'll start off with the vehicle, which is going to have cog wall above the tracks, with some copper pipe wallpaper poking out of the middle. A line of purple rain wallpaper will run behind the grate, as well as behind the second pane of glass. Silly green balloon wall will make up the rest of the body of the vehicle. Bamboo fence and wooden fence will add some decorative bits and bobs to the top of it. Moving on to the ruins, blue slab and ash wood form the foundation, while blue tiled, gray brick, and ebonstone brick walls make up the majority of the structure inside. Ash wood, large bamboo, and iron brick walls make up some accents. Echo wall is used behind the actuated grate so that it allows the house to remain valid without affecting the appearance. Finally, some living leaf walls dot the structure and surrounding landscape to add some small bushes. Now for some decorations. I use yellow team platforms to add a few more accent pieces to the vehicle. Brass shelf acts as the door for the ruins. Inside there are some lizard lamps that are turned off, plus gothic bookcase, table, and chair. I placed some plants around the area with the rubble maker, and now the build has totally come together. Well, here is the subjective S-tier house. Another interesting build for me due to the extreme limit of available materials. Not as strict as the Meteorite house, but you get the point. Oh, speaking of the Meteorite house, I did just add one more thing to it. I forgot a light source to make the house valid, so I placed a steampunk lamp near the front door. And here's the final look at both of the houses. Leave a comment telling me what you think of these builds, and if you have any ideas for interesting things that you would like me to take on in another video. Viewer suggestions led to the F tier and S tier houses, and I had a ton of fun challenging myself with these limited blocks, so I really do want to hear what you all have in mind. If you're new to the channel and you like this video, please consider subscribing and checking out some of my other content. As for me, I will be moving on to preparing the next video. A huge thank you to my biggest supporter for the month. Sarcasm not intended. And be sure to check out my channel artist MythicalWater linked in the description below. Thank you all very much for watching. Be back soon with a new video. Happy building.